Welcome to the StoryADay podcast. This is Julie Duffy from StoryADay.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from StoryADay and the StoryADay podcast. This week, my mission is to get you excited about your writing again, and every day. It's one of the reasons I run the StoryADay challenge every year. It is the reason I'm introducing the brand new fun size StoryADay challenge this year. I want you to come to your desk often, and often I will talk about the fact that you need to get to your desk often enough that it becomes part of your routine, that you see yourself as a writer, that these things are just natural to you. But once you get to the desk, what I want you to do, I don't want you to just sit there and grind. Some days you're going to write and there's going to be not a lot of inspiration and you're just doing it to keep the muscles flexible. And you'll find that if you come to the StoryADay challenge in May or September and you do 31 days of stories, or you set your own rules and you decide that you're going to write on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, some days when you turn up, the prompt is not going to speak to you. Now you get to set your own rules. The prompts are just there to help you. You can decide that if the prompt doesn't speak to you, you'll go off and find another one. There's prompts all over the web. That's entirely easy to do. The other option the other rule you might set yourself is you're going to find a way to write to that prompt even if you have to dig really deeply. And some people do that, and I often hear from people that those are the moments when they stretch as a writer and they end the day, even if it felt like a bit of a slog getting going, they end the day with this little buzz of, I didn't think I could do anything with that, and look at me now. So there's that kind of excitement that you can get from writing. You may not sit down excited to write, or you may not look at the prompt and be like, woohoo, I know what to do with this one. But you can get excited about your writing by putting in the work, digging deep, ferreting around for whatever you can do to make that prompt work for you. And that kind of deep satisfaction of making something work can be very exciting. But I also want you to remember that there are days when you get to your desk and it just does feel effortless to start writing. Not every day, and certainly not if you haven't been exercising. When you work out, the first time is terrible, and maybe the 5th and 6th and 256th time, if you're doing it right while you're doing the exercise, it's still going to be an effort. It's not always going to be thoroughly enjoyable. But when you walk out the door of the gym, or when you come upstairs from the basement, or wherever you exercise, you get that that moment of, that was good. But some days when you're exercising, you hit the zone while you're doing it. Some days when you're painting, you hit the zone while you're there, and some days when you're writing, you hit the zone when you're in it. That's much more likely to happen the more often you write. So do think about joining us in the StoryADay challenge of one of the tracks that we're running this year, one of the flavors. Make up your own rules, and if you want to find out more, come over to StoryADay and poke about the site. You can go into the menu at the top and go to the About and the Start Here. You can click on the things on the front page which tell you a little bit about the challenge. But what would it be like, right, if you knew that you were a writer, that you got up every day and knew that at some point today you were going to do something to further your sense of yourself as a writer? What if you never had to worry and ask yourself that question, am I a writer? Now, I'm not going to claim that hanging out with me at StoryADay is going to make that go away entirely, because depending on your personality, it may not. There are plenty of people who have been with me at StoryADay since 2010 who still have moments where they're like, am I really, is this? And luckily they're in a community which will happily say to them, stop it. Of course you're a writer. You're just having a wobble. We all get them. And then, Look at what you wrote. It's lovely to have a community around you that says, look, remember that story that you wrote that I read? Of course you're a writer. But you can get some of that yourself by turning up for your work. And turning up is one of those things that gives you joy and excitement. What if you could get up every day knowing you're going to write, find that time that you've set aside for writing, grab a hot beverage, sit down at your desk, open your notebook or your laptop or whatever you write on, and just go without any of the second guessing, without any of the angst. And once you start doing the work, it can be an effort, but it's not energy spent on angst. It's not energy spent on, am I going to write today? Imagine just having that as part of your life. That's what I see all the time with people who have been through the StoryADay challenge, who've made a commitment to their writing, who've started to embrace the identity of writer. And what if you could truly get comfortable with the idea that writing well is not a prerequisite for getting a thing done? That writing a lot is the first step to getting better. Practice is the first step to becoming competent at something. And so often with our writing, we stop ourselves from practicing because the thing that we're working on right now isn't great. I've played the piano since I was 7 years old, on and off over the past couple of decades. I don't play regularly. When I sit down to play again, I'm rusty. My fingers don't remember what they're supposed to do. And I have to go over, no matter how simple the piece, I have to go over like in a 4-bar stretch, the pattern, until my fingers loosen up and the muscle memory comes back. Writing a lot keeps that flexibility in your brain, in your fingers even, for writing. So I am going to make a big case over the next couple of months for you just to write a lot. The rest of the year we do stuff like focus on revision and focus on craft aspects and how to create compelling characters and all those things that you can find a million workshops online about, and you can go to conferences and take a workshop on this and a workshop on that and a workshop on the next thing. But what I'm going to be spending time on for the next couple of months leading up to StoryADay May and beyond, I'm going to be encouraging you to think about that practice, to think about writing a lot, to think about finding the joy, to cultivate a mindset that lets you get to the page, that lets you write a lot and doesn't worry too much about it. I think I mentioned on the podcast last week that Caroline Kim, who's one of the award-winning writers who gave us a prompt last year, talked about this at a recent conference. She talked about the fact that she just does this sometimes. She sits down and writes 500 word to 1,000 word stories for a month and then doesn't look at them. And she doesn't worry about how they turn out. She just wants to get them done. And then after a couple of months, she comes back and reads them. And sometimes she's pleasantly surprised. Sometimes she finds an idea that's worth it. But taking away the judgment from the practice is hugely important, and it's possible, and it's something that I'm going to be encouraging you to think about. This is an amazing moment in history to be an artist, a creator, a writer. It's not necessarily the easiest time to make a living as an artist or a creator. I don't think it ever really was easy though. You always had to be the best of the best to attract a rich patron, or lucky to attract a rich patron in the days when that was what funded art. It's rare in human history for general society to nurture artists with endless grants or paid positions. It's always been difficult to make a living as a writer. But what it has never been is easier to reach an audience as a writer. Now, this started a couple of decades ago, maybe 3 almost decades ago, with the birth of the internet, but it was already happening before that with the computer and the ease of photocopying, mimeographing, typesetting in word processors. You could create your own little zines, your own little hobby magazines, and you could get them even into bookstores. You could distribute them around your neighborhood. You could leave them in coffee shops. This kind of stuff has been going on forever. It became a lot easier in the 80s and 90s to reproduce our writing and spread it. And then there was this massive shift, of course, in the mid-90s when the internet became something that we all got access to. And more people were there. One of the first things I noticed when I went online were communities springing up around writers and writing and people sharing their work. You'll know if you've been following me for a while that I worked for one of the first companies, for the first company that made print on publishing available directly to writers, which meant you could get paperbacks of your book and they could get, ordered online and sent directly to your customer, printed on demand when they ordered. We also made ebooks available to people, and then Amazon came along and sort of centralized that distribution. And whatever your views on Amazon, they really revolutionized the world for self-publishers. And now there are many, many services we can use. You don't even need to use a service. You can write your stories and you can find a readership by sharing them at first with your inner circle, people you know who like to read the same kind of things you like to read, which are probably quite like what you're writing. And you simply ask, would you like to sign up for my newsletter, right? And then you email them a story once a month or however often you write a story. And then you ask them, hey, if you enjoyed this, send it to a friend. And then maybe you use a service like Patreon to even get paid for that. People can support you for creating the work that you want to create. It's not necessarily going to pay your mortgage and your mansion in Miami Beach and all of those things. But there are so many ways for us to get feedback on our writing and for us to reach directly the readers. I don't think that John Steinbeck had a very satisfying relationship with his readers. In fact, I'm pretty sure he didn't, because in the introduction to his later book, Travels with Charlie, he talks about the fact that he had written about, life in the US in a particular time when he was a young man, when he wasn't well known, when he was still traveling and living among people who were involved with the Dust Bowl and with all of that, churn in society. But by the 50s, he'd kind of lost touch with America. So he went on this RV kind of trip in a truck across America to try and find a connection again. It didn't go that well, and I think he cut the journey short because he didn't feel like he had any connection with the people he was meeting. I would like to suggest that if he was writing today, it would be much easier for him to build a connection with readers because he wouldn't necessarily have a wall put between him by the publisher. In the 30s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, if you wanted to get your work to a readership, you really had to go through a publisher. And the publisher would do all of the work, the only person you would talk to about your book really was the publisher or a professional book critic or interviewer in the mass media. You might get letters from readers saying, oh, I enjoyed your book and here's how it touched me, and great, you get a few letters, maybe a few hundred letters from people, but that was, again, there was a remove of time because there's usually like a year or two between when you write a book and when the publisher gets it out, and then a year or two before somebody reads it, and then months before they write to you and you're working on the next project by then. Nowadays, you can finish a story, email it to a readership, get comments back from them. You can upload it to Wattpad. You can upload it to Amazon. You can send it out to your friends. We have so many, many ways to reach readers and to be read that this is a wonderful time. And I want to talk about that in the context of getting excited about writing again, because one of the things that grinds people down, once I've convinced you all to write and to practice and to build a writing practice, those old messages start creeping in about what success really means. And yes, you may want to get published and you may want a mass readership and you may think you have a really successful commercial idea. Great, keep working on that. I don't want to dissuade you from that. But I do always encourage people to block out those voices which tell you you're not successful unless you are traditionally publishing and on the New York Times bestseller list and being given a book tour, which doesn't really happen that much anymore. Success, usually the trappings of success, all of that stuff, the book tour, the publisher, the magazine articles, all of it is in service of what you really want. And what you really want is to be read. And what you really want is to be read so that you feel like you're making a connection with another human heart. And we can have that any day of the week if we are courageous enough to write our stories, if we are courageous enough to put them out there, if we are humble enough to start with a small audience and to share with a few people, and if we are brave enough to shut out the voices that say the only path to success is to be accepted by some gatekeeper, if we are committed enough to our own practice that we are willing to study and put things that we're learning into our writing and trust that we are doing our best work and that we're always improving and that other people's opinion is just that. We all cling on to stories of people who've been rejected 50, 70, 120 times because deep down we really know, truly, that anyone's commentary on your story is as valid as anyone else's. And none of it matters. The ones that matter are the ones where someone makes a connection with you. We've all read books that are technically not brilliant, but are massive page turners because the author understands how to do hooks at the end of chapters, or they understand how to keep us excited. They understand psychology, or they've created a really compelling character that you can't let go. And we've all read books that are beautifully written that we keep putting down because there's no tension and there's nothing to keep us turning the pages. And it doesn't mean it's not a book we like. It's a different experience. And we might write to that author and tell them we were moved by their book, but it might take us a couple of years to get through it. Don't let anyone define success for you. Don't let anyone rob you of your excitement. Your urge to write is completely valid. The work that you're doing, if you are progressing, if you are learning, if you are pushing yourself, if you are feeling some discomfort, that's all great. If you're feeling some joy when you're writing, that's great too. But the discomfort tends to come when you're on the verge of something. Don't let anyone rob you of your joy and excitement because of some expectation that has nothing to do with making connections between you and another reader. I am going to be doing my darndest to get you excited about writing over the next couple of months. The StoryADay May Challenge is coming up. There will be 31 prompts for people who want to do that version of the challenge. There will be another track, which is a lighter, gentler version of the challenge, which will have daily tasks for you to do, which might be as simple as posting something on social media, might be as simple as writing something in a notebook. Things that you can do very easily without a huge commitment of time that are going to teach you that yes, you can be a writer every day, even if you're not actually adding new words to the page every day. There will also be a part of that fun-sized challenge which involves coming up with a story idea, writing a draft of the story, assessing how it went. This is the kind of stuff I do in my courses. I do this a lot in the iWriter course. I do it in the lead up to the courses and to when I'm inviting people into Superstars. I do a really deep dive on this stuff. This is going to be an extravaganza, a celebration of the short story, a celebration of you as a writer. It's entirely possible for you to be a writer, even if you think you don't have time, even if you don't think you have the confidence, even if you've been burned before by criticism. I'm going to help you get that excitement back. Because if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't tuned out yet, clearly there's something in you that demands to be listened to. You love writing. It makes you happy. It makes you more yourself. It makes you more fun to be around. Ask me how I know. My family is much happier when I'm writing. Okay, that's it. StoryADay May is coming. It's going to be all about getting you excited about your writing again. It's possible. People do it every year. They use the challenge to limber up, to get excited, to power them through the next few months. I hope you'll be with us. But meanwhile, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I will be back soon with more writing excitement for you. Because you're a writer, your voice matters, the world is waiting for your stories. There's somebody out there who will absolutely connect with the stories you have to share in the way that only you can share them. I hope you're having some fun this week. Be creative, do something to feed your inner writer, and be kind to your inner writer, won't you? Keep writing. If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the StoryADay 3-Day Challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days. And it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-Day Challenge at storyaday.org/3DC. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.